Welcome to A Pair of Bookends, the book club you can carry anywhere. We are your hosts and hopefully your new bookish pals. I'm Hannah MacDonald.
And I'm Lydia Clare. Welcome, Bookends, to our book club episode for May. This month, we are diving into Girls by Kirsty Capes. At the time of her death, Ingrid Olsen was known as a brilliant artist, but a terrible mother to her girls, Matilda and Nora. It was also known that her legacy would live on forever. In an attempt to protect Ingrid's final wishes, her daughters embark on an all-or-nothing trip, but soon begin to realise that the ties that bound them might also break them. A moving and compelling novel about connection, family, legacy, and love.
It's gorgeous, Lyd. Kirsty Capes is a digital marketing strategist and a novelist based in Slough. She holds a PhD from Brunel University, London. Her thesis investigates representations of the care experience in contemporary British fiction. She's the author of 3 novels. Her debut, Careless, was longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction in 2022 and was a Cosmopolitan, BBC, Stylist, Daily Mail, Good Housekeeping and Guardian Best Book Pick for 2021. She was described by the late Benjamin Zephaniah as the literary equivalent of gold dust, and her latest novel, Girls, will be published by Orient tomorrow. We have been trying to get her on the pod for the longest time, so we can finally say welcome, Kirsty, to A Pair of Bookends.
Hello, thank you for having me. We made it happen finally.
We made it!
Finally, honestly, it's been a long time in the making, but we're very excited that you're with us. And we like to start our podcast with our favourite question, which is, what are you currently reading?
So, what I'm currently reading, and I'm not very far into it, is My Sister, the Serial Killer. I'm literally like maybe, I don't know, like 30 pages in or something. Like it's very early days, but my own sister read it a couple of years ago. She actually read my copy, took it on holiday, and then I finally got my copy back. So it's been on my list for ages. And at the moment I'm going through like a really short book phase. So like everything has to be like, short enough to read in like a day or 2 days.
Yeah.
And this is quite a short book, so I thought, okay, it's time to read it. And I'm really enjoying it so far. It's very good.
It's so good. I think I
love
read it in like a train journey.
Really?
It's so
Okay.
pacey, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what I'm finding. And really funny as well, I think. So,
Yes.
yeah, enjoying
So-
it.
It's very kind of like dry humour and dark humour, which is kind of my favourite.
Yeah.
Yeah, somebody dies and Lydia makes a joke out of it, so.
Yeah,
Listen,
exactly.
If you don't laugh.
You've got to find humour in the darkness. I told you there.
And I know that Lydia will no doubt be asking about that later in the podcast. But I want to chat before we get on to Girls, because we chat to a lot of debut authors on the podcast. And as I said in my intro, your debut, Careless, was longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction, which is an incredible achievement. What was that experience like for you? And I wanted to know, did you feel much pressure when writing your second and third books?
Oh my God. Yes. So much pressure. I mean, like, so at the time it was like just so incredible and like validating and wonderful that the book got to reach an audience that I think without that prize it would never have reached the audience that it did. And then I think because of the subject matter of that book, it's, a book about foster care, and it's not something that is kind of really sort of platformed a lot in fiction. So I think it felt very meaningful to me that it meant by Careless getting longlisted for the Women's Prize, it meant that a lot of people who hadn't interacted with the care system whatsoever were having an opportunity to read about it and kind of learn something. So that it was just that was incredibly special to have that happen. In terms of the pressure, my God, after that, I was like, Jesus, I've literally got nothing left. But I think the other thing I think a lot of the time with debut novels is that lots of people, I definitely felt this, and I know from like talking to other authors, you kind of put like a whole life of ideas into your first book, because it's the first one, and it's kind of every like funny idea or funny little quippy thing you've ever thought of go into that first book. And then I think what happened with me was I was on a 2-book deal. So, I spent 5 years writing Careless. And then my second book, I think I had a 12-month deadline or something for it. So it was just like literally chalk and cheese, like the sort of experience of writing. And I was like, I'm wrung out. I haven't got like an original idea left in me. So it was, I'm being quite candid, but yeah, so it was really that yeah, there was a lot of pressure, but I think also, I reflecting back on all of what happened now, I think it basically gave me like a crash course in writing novels, but also in experiencing the publishing industry as an author as well, because I kind of got like, quite a broad spectrum of what the publishing industry is like and what it's like to go through it as an author. And that was really valuable for me. And I think as well with that, with my second book, writing that, it helped me prove to myself that I could be a novelist and I wasn't just someone who wrote one book and then that was it kind of thing. And then I think that I really carried that into the writing of Girls. And I feel like going into that book, I felt so much more confident in myself as a writer. And I felt more kind of empowered to kind of explore different ideas and different themes that were like massively outside of my own experience, in a way that I felt that with both Careless and my second book Love Me Not, I kept it quite close to my own experience. And I think publishing those two books and kind of realizing yes I can do this gave me the confidence to kind of be a bit more adventurous and go a bit like outside of my normal stomping grounds with Girls.
Did you have more time then between writing the second and third than you'd had with the first and second?
Yes, I had more time, and then I think also I planned my time a lot better as well.
Right.
So yeah, I think it took me, I think my editor gave me just over 18 months to write Girls, and I ended up getting the first draft down in almost bang on 12 months. And then I did a period of editing just on my own, and then I sent it to my editor, and then we had a longer editorial process. And then I think the sort of final manuscript was kind of signed off like late last year, like November time, I think.
I feel like that's incredible that you managed to do the first draft in 12 months. Like that, the
Yeah.
idea of that
Do you
stresses
know,
me out.
it's really weird because I was really like insistent. I was like, I need more time. I need more time. So I really kind of like got my elbows out and was like, no, I want at least 18 months for the first draft. And then as soon as I had more time, I was like, right, this is just like falling out of me. And I managed to get it down really quickly. But I think it was like the psychological thing as well of like knowing that I had the space if I needed it. So yeah, it's really funny how that happens. But I also got to take some time off from my 9 to 5, which was very nice too. So I had a bit more time, like, and headspace, like, in terms of how much I was working on, like, my day job as well.
I love a deadline. I love a difficult deadline. So for me, and Hannah knows this with like the podcast, like reading the books, doing notes for it, and all sorts. Like everything with me is very much like to the wire, and then it gets done, but it's to the wire. Whereas I
Yeah,
feel like
yeah.
Hannah's a bit more of a she would have used that 18 months very well. Whereas I would
Yeah.
have probably have left it to like 2 months to go and been like, I need to write a book.
Yeah. This is the thing. I'm very deadline oriented. I'm like you as well, but I think also there is like something weird going on psychologically about the perception of the time that you think you have as well. But yeah, it all came out well in the end.
Yes. And it really did because we absolutely adored Girls.
Oh, thank
It,
you.
it is such a tremendous book. It's a truly innovative novel. It feels very much like a family saga with generations of this one family all interwoven into the narrative around kind of this central figure of Ingrid. Why this story and why this family?
Oh my God. Well, thank you. Thank you for saying that. Sorry, I can't keep answering every question of yours going, oh my God, like that. Sorry.
It's a big one. It's
You
a big one. I
absolutely can.
Do you know, the other thing is I should have told you, this is the first thing I'm doing for Girls, like press wise.
Oh
So
my God.
yeah, so some of these answers are going to be a bit like not quite
Don't
fine-tuned
worry.
yet, but
We're
you're
still
going to get
honest.
like the unfiltered, like,
We
un-PR'd
love
version.
that. We love that.
So why this story? Why this family? So I think there were a few different things that I was really interested in thinking about for this book. And some of them were kind of things I'd been inspired by. and then some were, experiences that I wanted to kind of pull together into one story. So the first thing that I did was I went on a road trip through Nevada and California in 2019 with a friend of mine, and we hired a camper van and we drove through the desert, and it was just like such an incredible experience, and I felt really connected to like the landscape and the kind of vistas that we were driving through, and it was just like a really beautiful like healing experience where I feel like I sort of learned a lot about myself and also about like just traveling in general. I haven't traveled that much, and I redid the trip on my own last year, and again it was like really I've never traveled alone, and that was just really, really like such a powerful experience in terms of like learning things about myself as well. So I really, really wanted to write a road trip story, and I really don't like journey narratives, so so I was like, oh, okay, so I want to write a journey narrative, but I want to like, do it in a way that is different from like your typical quest story, right? So this is kind of where I started coming up with the characters. So I think I started off with Nora, and then, I wanted to write about sisters and sisterhood. I'm really close with my sister, and I think a lot of my other two books quite often they deal with mothers, and I wanted I always end up writing about mothers even if I try not to, but I wanted to look at other family dynamics as well, and also the experience of being a mother, which I haven't written a character from the perspective of a character who has children before. So there were lots of areas where I like wanted to challenge myself. And then I think the sort of third thing, if you like, that was kind of happening was at the beginning of 2021, I moved into my own flat and I was living alone for the first time. And it was the really, really, really bad lockdown. Do you remember the one where like Christmas got cancelled and stuff? And it was like the bleak midwinter. So it was January and I was living alone for the first time and I was writing. And it was like a really, really difficult experience, like to be kind of in this like enforced isolation, but also to be trying to create at the same time. And I really didn't want to write a COVID story. I wanted to write about this experience, but I did not want to write about COVID because I just felt like that's not something I want to read. And I don't know if it's something that other people want to read yet. Although Madeline Gray did it in Green Dot and she did it really well. But
So good.
so good, so good. So maybe it is time to start writing about COVID now. But at the time, I was like, I can't write about COVID. So I was really interested in this idea of what it's like to create art in isolation and what that does to like the sort of the process of the making, and also what it does to the person. And that's kind of where Nora came from as the character. And then I think, from there, those were like the kind of the foundations, and then if you like the house kind of got built around that, and that's where I ended up with Girls. But yeah, it was I don't think I was planning on the book having that much scope when I started, and then just sort of over the course of writing it kind of just built up and built up and built up, and then became this like really big story. And yeah, and it just
I
kept
love
growing.
that. I think it's so funny though that you were like, "Oh, I'm not going to write about COVID," and you also said that you didn't like journey
Yeah.
narratives, but then
Yeah.
it was clearly like an escapism thing for you that you wanted to write this like huge road trip. I also am very jealous that you can go on a road trip like that and just call it research.
I know.
That is like the dream.
Yeah. It was so when I was like dining out in San Francisco by myself and like, oh, I'll just treat myself to a nice meal. I was like, this is justified spending because it's for the book, even though it like wasn't really, but yeah, it
It's
was
going on the
definitely
taxes.
worth it. Yeah, exactly. Tax write-off, mate.
I love that. You touched a little bit on your own sister before,
Mm,
and I've said many times on the podcast that the sister dynamic is one of my favorite dynamics to read in books. I'm
mm.
the oldest of four girls, so I'm very protective over my sisters, and I could totally relate to a lot of the stuff in the book. I wanted to know, like, what do you think it is that makes the sister dynamic so powerful? And I also wanted to know how you went about creating the dynamic between Matilda and Nora, because it feels both like close and loving, but then it's also quite fraught and uneven at the same time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think all like the same as you. All of my favorite books have sisters in them. Like, I love Little Women.
Hmm.
I love Pride and Prejudice. I love Jane Austen, and I love that like all of these like this relationship. I think is the most important relationship for a lot of women in their lives, and it's quite rarely given like the attention that it deserves. And I feel like when it is, it's really beautiful and it tells us so much about like like the interior lives of women when you write about sisters. And I think a lot of the time sisters are kind of like projections of one another as well.
Hmm.
So a lot I find this a lot with my sister. My insecurities or my worries or my fears, my sister is like a sounding board for that. And even in our kind of arguments or like our tense times, I can see that dynamic playing out a lot. So, that's I really wanted to write a sister relationship for those reasons. And I'm a younger sister. So I've had some really interesting conversations with my best friend who is an oldest sister. And, we often talk about, kind of like the hierarchy of sisters or like, favoritism and stuff like
Hmm.
that. And we have like really different perspectives on it. And I think we've kind of learned a lot from each other just talking about it in terms
Hmm.
of like, I think a lot of the time, me as a younger sister, I thought that my older sister had a lot more freedoms than I ever did when I was growing up. But then I think also she had a lot more responsibility
Hmm.
than I did as well. A lot of the time she had to be like the second mum in the house, especially when in sort of like times of crisis and stuff like that. And it was a perspective I hadn't really ever thought about. So I was really interested in this idea of like, the line between being a parent and being an older sibling. And I think that really comes out in Mattie's character as the older sister and as the
Hmm.
narrator. A lot of the time she does have to be the parent
Hmm.
as well as the older sister. And then I think the real kind of fracture point of that relationship is when Mattie decides, as a teenager, no, I have to put myself first now because I'm about to become a mum. And I think that's where it starts for them. But then I think that it's just there are so many layers to sister relationships, I think. And
Totally.
I think in Mattie and Nora's relationship, I wanted to have those moments of light and those moments of shade as well, because it is, isn't it? It's like you do have moments of like complete joy and unconditional love, but also you have moments where you want to,
Oh my
like
God, totally. And it completely resonated with me, the whole like being the oldest and having to take on that role as second mum. And my
mm,
sister's writing every single one of my birthday cards, like, you've always been like a second mum. Like, they say it every
oh,
time. And it's like, it has been like being their oldest sister has been like one of the greatest joys of my life, but
mm,
also like one of the biggest pains of my life.
yeah,
Like, the anxiety it causes me is
yeah,
just like something else. And and then they'll say how much they appreciate me, but then when we have an argument, they're like, "You're not mum." And I'm like,
mm,
"You want me to be mum when
yeah,
when you need
exactly. When
me,
it
but when
suits, yeah.
when it suits you." So yeah, there was a lot of moments in the book that I was like, God, that is exactly how it feels. But
Mm.
I have to say, the argument in the ocean was just like chef's kiss, just everything you've ever needed to get out of your
Yeah.
system. I
I
can
was
only.
literally like, please mention the argument and the beach.
It was
Because
so good.
that's your sisters to our tea.
I loved it.
Oh, I'm really glad you liked that bit. I really wanted to have some funny moments in there as well, like that, because I think some of it can be quite bleak, especially
Mhm.
like all of the dynamics and like the weight of the history between Matthew and Nora. So for them to just get in the sea and like start flinging seaweed at each other felt like the right thing for them to be doing, and as for
It's
me as
That was
well, right?
art.
um, now talking about bleak. I would like
Here
to
we go.
delve into Nora a little,
Hmm.
um, and particularly her struggles with mental health and poor mental health issues. A
Mm.
factor that really resonated with me. I've actually got a quote from the book that I'm going to read that I felt like I don't know, I gasped when I read it because I was just like, oh my goodness, this is so real. So This is Nora talking about herself. I'm going to die right here on this mattress, and no one is going to know about it. I'm going to be one of those cases you hear about on the news where they don't find the body for weeks and weeks, and by the time someone realizes I'm missing, that I haven't been seen, all of the organic matter of my body will have rotted away and melted through the bed sheets and the mattress and the bed frame, and all that'll be left of me is this big brown smelly stain, and they'll have to get people in hazmat suits to come and hose me off the bed linen, and that's all I'll be remembered for being the sad fuck who died alone and no one knew. No one will know and no one will care. I realised that I didn't care either. It was almost like peaceful, the idea of dying. Anything to stop my brain buzzing. Anything for a little bit of quiet. I mean, that is just phenomenal. I myself have struggled with things in that area, and I think that you write about it with such honesty and integrity that I feel it's really going to resonate with a lot of people. The honesty with which Nora details her feelings is brilliantly done. How did you get this so accurate? How did you do
Well, I think you read that really beautifully,
You
so thank you.
did.
I haven't heard it read out loud, so it was really nice to hear that. Thank you. How did I get it so accurate? God, I think I think for me, like I've struggled with my mental health over the years, and at times I've been in really good places, and then at times I've been in, places not that far off from where Nora is in that scene. And I think that, a lot of Nora's character, I really drew on my own kind of personal experiences to kind of pull that together, and also the experiences of my friends as well, who have, gone through similar kind of depressive or suicidal episodes. And I think that it's just something that has been a part of my life for a very long time. And, I was really lucky to get help when I was at my lowest points in terms of kind of getting support from the NHS and that kind of thing. And that really helped me get to a place where I was able to write about it, I think. When I was kind of in at like my worst points of my mental health, I wasn't able to reflect on it in any kind of rational way, because I think when you're in the middle of it that is just like the whole thing that is happening in your life, and it's your whole existence. But I think, having some distance from it and being able to look back on it, I was able to think about my own thought processes and where I was at, and kind of use that to kind of inform the character. And I think, I think it was important to get it right as well. And there's, no two people's experience of kind of suicidal ideation or depression or anxiety is going to be the same. Everyone kind of experiences it very differently. But I wanted to write something that was true to my experience and true to how it felt for me when I was going through it. And that's kind of where I ended up with Nora.
And I think you definitely did, 100%. And I think that a lot of the time it can be done with a heavy hand. And I think that you could tell that this was coming from a place of informed feeling. And you can tell throughout the book that Nora is a person that is struggling on a fundamental level with her mental health, and that is such a part of her identity and such a part of her that you can't separate the mental health issue from the person.
Yeah.
He's very much insulated in that way, and I think that that's when you are struggling, that tends to be the way that you feel, and that tends
Yeah.
to be the way that people around you observe you as well. And you just did it brilliantly.
Oh, thank you so much. That really means a lot. Thank you. I think the other thing is a lot of the book is from Mattie's perspective as well, and I was kind of interested in, giving that outsider's perspective on what's going on too. And I think a lot of the time, the way that Mattie is kind of not helpful in dealing with Nora is that a lot of the time she's just kind of like, why can't you just get better? Like, she's kind of throwing her hands up and not really understanding. And I think it's like Mattie has to go on that journey as well, where she has to, gain that understanding of, the mental illness, and kind of understand that she can't just fix it, kind of thing. And I think that's, something that's a journey that she goes on as well with like Nora's Nora's help and seeing things from Nora's perspective.
Yeah, a lot of the time you think just leave her be, just leave her
Yeah,
be, but she can't because she wants to fix it and she
exactly.
wants, are you okay? I think she asks her if she's okay about 40 billion times in the book,
Yeah,
and she doesn't need to be asked, but from Mattie's perspective, you completely understand why
yeah,
she
totally.
is
Yeah.
so concerned, and I think that it's a wonderful approach to the character of Nora as well, is seeing her from the outside. I thought that was a really inventive way of doing it.
It was beautiful. I want to speak about the formatting of the book because that was something I was really interested in. Between the chapters of Girls, you have these extracts from interviews that are going to be included in a book that the character Richard is writing about the protagonist's mother's life. When did you decide that you wanted these interviews to feature in the book, and did they help you to shape the voice of the characters?
Yeah, I think you've kind of answered the question and that I think it was really important to get the voices of all the characters right. Even though Matty is the narrator, there were lots of characters whose perspective I wanted to bring in and have like the opportunity to have their voices heard in the story, especially Nora. I think it started with Nora because I really needed Nora to have a voice in the story and not just to have her shown from other people's point of view. So that's kind of where I started with it. And then I think also Ingrid is dead for the entirety of the book. And she is such an important character in both of the girls' lives that I also needed to have some context for her, her character, but also her relationship with the other characters as well. So I was really thinking about like, okay, what are the ways that I could do this that is, perhaps a bit different, but also in keeping with the sort of structural notions of the book. And that's kind of where I sort of brought in the idea of having a biography in there. And I really liked the idea of kind of having a novel where there were lots of different like found documents that were included and almost like a found footage documentary or something where all of these different kind of sources are pulled together into like this tapestry and that weaves the story. So there's like the front story, which is kind of Matty, Nora and Beanie on the road trip, and then there's all of the context for how they got there, which comes in through like the biography and the interviews and stuff like that. So yeah, and I just really liked the idea of kind of having, different types of text in the book because it's something I haven't done before and I wanted to stretch myself in that way too. Yeah, but I think for me it was really important to have especially Nora's voice come through in some way.
I really enjoyed that you featured them, and I think, like you said, like we hear a lot from Mattie's perspective, so it was really nice to read from Nora's sort of point of view and kind of understand her a little bit better because, like you said, like we're often like looking at her from Mattie's perspective and this kind of we're on this like learning journey with her, so actually to hear straight from her was really nice. It was a nice addition to the book.
Yeah, and I felt like it was nice that it wasn't this dual narrative, one person, one chapter, one person, one chapter, one person. It was lovely to kind of have like those different elements to it as well. Even just the formatting on the page, it was enjoyable to read. So, great job.
Yeah, thanks. I
Oh,
really
thank
enjoyed
you.
that. Thanks.
Thank you, that's great.
Well, I'm glad you really liked it because it really felt like a challenge to as a writer it felt quite ambitious to do that. So
Yeah,
I'm glad that it's paid off and that you enjoyed it.
100%.
definitely. 100%. Humor, while we're laughing, humor is key to this novel, and it's key to a novel like this. Anything that's quite dark, anything that can be quite bleak in parts. I
Mm.
think we've touched on it before. You need comic relief and you need moments of levity. In particular, I really loved the character of Randy and the RV experience. Which I won't give too much away because it's just so much fun to read, where I felt like it was just full on humorous. It was just hysterical. And something happens where you just think this is bonkers and it's just brilliant. Were you conscious of striking a balance with mood in the book?
Yeah, I think I mean, I felt when I went into it, I was like, there has to be some funny bits in this book because I knew where I wanted the book to end up. And I knew that I had to pull in some lighter moments. Otherwise, people are going to be reading this book and then they're going to put it down because it's so bleak. So but it was really important to have those moments of lightness and have like these random surreal things happen. I was thinking of things like Little Miss Sunshine, the film. So
Yes, it brought to mind that. Yeah.
well, this is the thing, because it's like Little Miss Sunshine is it's such a devastating film, but it's also hilarious. And I wanted to have that balance and I think also sometimes the most horrendous things that can ever happen are also like really fucking hilarious as well, because
Yeah.
it's like you have to laugh, otherwise you'll cry kind of thing. So I really wanted to have both of those. And I'm so glad you say that, because I'm always terrified that no one's going to think it's funny. So I'm glad you found it funny. But yeah, that was really important. And going into it, I was kind of just thinking about what are like the most batshit things that could happen to someone if they were on a road trip to scatter their mother's ashes. And then I kind of just like threw all of them in. And it worked apparently. So yeah, I'm really pleased about that. But I think also in terms of characters, like I wanted to have, Beanie as such a light and like joyous character.
Mhm.
And I think to have her be that kind of person where she is so positive and she's so like she has such like a lust for life, that felt really important
Mhm.
to kind of counterbalance all of like the dark shit that's going on between Matty and Nora on the road trip, to kind of have that counterbalance too.
Beanie was great. I was a big fan of Beanie. And I do think that you did this really great job of striking that balance. It is like a journey narrative. We go on this literal journey with them, but we do have this like big emotional journey with them. And it really does feel like that, when I finished the book last night and I was staying at my friend's and she was asleep next to me and I closed the book and I was like, what? What do I do now? Like, because it just feels like I'd had this like huge experience, and then I looked next to me and she was fast asleep, and I was like, "Are you
Yeah.
joking? Like, I've just had this huge experience, and I've got nobody to talk to about it. Like, what do you
Oh,
mean?"
yeah.
But it really feels like that, and I think it does have this really gorgeous strike between the humor and then the really painful moments, and I do think you need that. I like me and Lydia joke a lot because I'll say to Lydia that like her humor can be quite like inappropriate and it's like that's how like Lydia copes with shit. Like it's just how it is. And I didn't kind of understand that sort of humor. Like I just thought, oh, it's just Lyd. And then
Mm.
when in the best way possible, I was like,
Yeah.
it's just Lyd. And anybody that knows and loves Lyd would probably say the same. But like I kind of understood it. My granddad died like a month ago. Here we go. And I went into like the week when he was dying. We were like the whole family were kind of in this room, and there was a lot of laughter in that time. And
Mm.
you think it's going to be like this really sad period, and then like I rocked up one day and I was like, oh, I need to take my jumper off. And then I was like, shit, why have I put this t-shirt on? And I'd put the show must go on top
Oh
on.
my God.
And you just like you've got to laugh like
Yeah.
it was like because if you don't you'll cry like
Yeah,
and it,
this
and
is it.
you don't
Yeah.
want everything to feel bleak all the time. So I think yeah, you did have this really nice balance in the book, but I am going to bring it back down and talk about grief. I'm sorry. Just the way we are. But it is impossible to discuss this book without talking about grief
Mm.
and the kind of role that it plays in these characters' lives, because it's not just the fact that they've got this kind of complicated grief about them losing their mother. It's also them kind of grieving other things as well. So
Mm.
they're grieving like the childhood that they didn't get to experience, the kind of innocence that they weren't kind of allowed to have, and the relationships that they've missed out on because of the sort of chaotic nature of their lives. And I really want to read a quote as well. We didn't do this on purpose, I promise. But there's a quote in the book about grief, and it really resonated with me. And I know the same for Lydia. And I'm going to omit names from this quote because I don't want to spoil anything. But I just think this quote was really beautiful. So I hope you'll let me read that back to you. I'm sorry. Grief comes in waves. Sometimes it's there and in every second of every waking moment, and it is paralyzing. You cannot think, eat, breathe, or speak without the presence of them in the intention of every choice you make. It slides a hand around your esophagus and doesn't let go until you can't breathe, until you're choking. In quieter moments, more bearable moments, the hand is on the small of your back, guiding your body but never pushing. I liked having that hand there, even though it was painful, even though sometimes it kept me awake at night and made me resentful and cruel and unreachable because it made existence more real to me. And I'm just going to leave that there, but I had to not include the name in there because I don't want to spoil anything. But I just thought you captured grief so beautifully. Was it important to you to approach this subject in a particular way?
That's a really good question. I think when I was writing, I don't think I was very consciously thinking about, the presentation of grief.
Hmm.
I think it came quite naturally in terms of, just kind of drawing from my own experience and how it felt for me. And I think there was a lot of, media that helped as well. And also I read a couple of kind of academic books too about dealing with grief. And I think the one thing I really wanted to get across was like this idea of dissociating when going through periods of grief, and like the idea that you're kind of not experiencing it in your own body, but you're kind of viewing what's happening from outside your body, or you're not connected to your own body. And I think that to me was like my kind of overwhelming experience when
Hmm.
I was grieving. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that to me was very important. But I think it was more about, I think something that I sort of try to do in all of my writing is kind of just go with like gut feeling a lot of the time, and just think about the kind of the visceral emotions that come with that feeling, and also like the bodily feelings too.
Hmm.
And I think that's kind of my that was my starting point for writing about that grief in the book. But I think as well, there's a lot of, guilt for Matty and Nora because they're also not grieving their mum in the way that they think they should be. And that's something that really resonated with me as well. And I felt it was really important to talk about that. Yeah, it wasn't anything I was really, really consciously, I didn't kind of go into it, thinking that I had to be didactic in any way.
Hmm.
It was very much just kind of like a how it felt to me, like viscerally, and kind of going from there.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting as well, though, what you said about like the way that they experience it and they don't think that like that's the right way. Like they're worried
Mm,
about whether that is the right way that they're dealing with it. And
mm,
I think, there is so much pressure to be dealing with things like that in a particular way because of the way it's, I don't know, like the way we see it on like screen, maybe like on like TV and film, there's just like this kind of like one size fits all sort of experience of grief. And like I'm just going back to like when my granddad died, like I was like, am I a bad person? Because I didn't cry very much at like the funeral. I cried on the day
mm,
he died, but
mm,
then there was like moments after it where I just didn't cry. Like my sister was like sobbing at the funeral and I just didn't. And I was looking at her and going like, should I be doing that?
mm, mm.
And I think, there is that pressure. So it was really great that you've explored that. And I think I definitely felt the sort of visceral nature of it, in the way that you write about them experiencing it. And I'm saying I'm not going to give any spoilers. So yeah, to the listeners, please read this so we can chat to you all about it because this is going to stress me out that I've got to wait until this book is out to talk to people about it. But you did it very well. That's all I'm going to say.
Oh, thank you. But yeah, I think no, that's really interesting what you say, and I think there is like, yeah, there is that pressure to like grieve in an appropriate way as well. And I
Yeah.
think, Matty and Nora don't grieve the death of their mum in ways that, sort of like the general kind of consensus would be are like very healthy ways to grieve, or like the right way to grieve. And I think they even kind of impose that on each other a little bit as well. Like they're kind of imposing these expectations on each other. So yeah, I think, yeah, now that we're talking about it, I think they do kind of go on this kind of undergo this like process as well during the book, in terms of kind of like accepting certain things that happen and understanding that they couldn't have changed those things as well.
And I think one of the things that I wanted to chat to you about was the fact that you'd kind of turned the concept of traditional motherhood on its head a little bit. We have this seemingly quite uncaring mother, of Ingrid, and a dedicated teenage mother in Matilda, and with Matilda and Beanie's, I think, quite relatively healthy relationship, which felt like a deliberate contrast to Ingrid's somewhat sort of dissociative form of love for her children. How did you develop those relationships, and what did you want to do with the concept of motherhood with this?
Well, so I think a couple of things. One thing was that I didn't want to fall into like this trap of like generational trauma tropes.
Hmm.
So it was really, really important to me that if Matty had like a crap mum, she would not be a crap mum. It was so important to me. And I think again, because she has her daughter when she's so young, she's like 17 or something or 16. I didn't want to fall into tropes about teenage mothers as well. My first book, Careless, follows Bess, who is a pregnant teenager, and I wanted to kind of almost continue that and kind of explore, okay, this is obviously, this character is not the same character that was in my first book, but what is the next step beyond that if you do kind of go through this journey and have a baby as a teenager, and then your baby is a teenager herself. So I was really, really interested in looking at that kind of other side of the coin, if you like, and I really wanted to like disrupt this idea that trauma begets trauma as well. And yeah, I think as well, I think I just really wanted to portray healthy relationships, because all of my mums in my books are like not very good mums. So I, I really wanted to look at motherhood from a different perspective. And also, I have never written from a mother's perspective as well. I've always written from the daughter. So, that I was really interested in that as well. And Matty is my age, or maybe like 2 or 3 years older than me, but obviously her life is very, very different from mine. And I had a lot of fun kind of imagining, someone who is kind of like similar demographically to me, but has choices have taken her on a completely different path. And yeah, so I think all of those things really I was interested in kind of exploring. But the most important thing for me was to have Matty be a good mum to her daughter, and kind of to make a bit of a point about those stereotypes we tend to see about teenage mums and about mums who come from abusive household situations. And I think as well, in terms of the kind of point that we meet Matty in the novel, her daughter Beanie is not a little girl anymore. She's kind of she's the age that Matty was when Matty got pregnant, and she's becoming an adult. She's kind of forming her own ideas and opinions about the world. She's kind of moving away from Matty, kind of both in terms of like her sort of ideology, but also physically, and emotionally. And I think I was really interested in that as well, and the idea of, having to give up, that relationship with your children because they're kind of becoming more independent. And obviously, Matty, when she was younger, she so wanted that relationship with her mum, and she wasn't able to have it. And she's spent all of this time at forming this really special bond with her own daughter, and now she's seeing it kind of start to break down a little bit. And it was important to kind of show that, and think about how that sort of exacerbated some of the other anxieties that she has as well.
It was really great to see, like you said, that you wanted to not fall into the sort of generational trauma trope, and to see how different Matty brings up Beanie, because I think, the way that Matty and Nora, like I said before, like they weren't allowed any kind of innocence, and they grew up in this like very bohemian world, and they had to sort of like fend for themselves. I did want to ask about the world that they sort of grew up in, and it would seem silly for me to kind of end this conversation without asking about this, because art features so heavily in the book, and their mother is this like renowned artist, and Nora is an artist in a different sort of, not medium, is that the right word? Who knows? I'm not an artist, I'm not good with the lingo. But I wanted to ask, what kind of appeals to you, what appealed to you in terms of writing about this world? Is art something that's an interest of yours, or is it just something that you wanted to write about for this book? How did it kind of come about?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, I've always been interested in art. So I did an A level in fine art, which I know isn't really, it doesn't mean much, but I think I've always kind of had a baseline interest in, the art world and different styles of painting and different kind of masters and things like that. And I think in terms of Ingrid's art, in terms of the style, I was really drawing on Lucian Freud for inspiration in terms of visually what her art looks like. But then I was also interested in like the culture of celebrity that comes with contemporary art. And it's quite rare that it happens, but when it does happen, it's like huge. So like Andy Warhol was probably like the biggest inspiration in terms of like the celebrity side of Ingrid's persona. And I wanted to write a story about celebrity, but also kind of celebrity that's kind of embedded in this like quote unquote high culture as well.
Hmm.
And I think that, thinking about like the friction between those two things, I think it comes up a lot looking at Ingrid's story. And then I think for Nora, my biggest inspiration was Marina Abramovich and her performance art. I saw the Royal Academy exhibition a few months ago and it's fucking amazing. I don't think they'd have it anymore, but yeah, if you can go and see a Marina Abramovich show, I would recommend it. Yeah, I was really interested in this idea of legacy, which comes up again and again in the book. And legacy kind of means different things to each of the characters in the book. And I think for Nora, it most closely resembles like that idea of like cultural capital and celebrity. And Nora is so keen to kind of carry on her mother's legacy, but she's also really, really resistant to it at the same time. Like she really wants to do her own thing and kind of come out of from under the shadow of Ingrid. And I think that's why she kind of chooses performance art, whereas her mum is kind of like a fine art oil painter. So I just really wanted to play with those different things really and think about how that kind of celebrity world intersects with the art world.
I mean, I have no kind of understanding of the art world. So, I mean, I work at a venue now, and we've got like a David Hoyle exhibition on, and I can't even say her name. Marina Abramovich has been in the building a few times.
Mm,
And I've seen these people, and I see the sort of treatment that she receives when she enters the building.
mm.
But it's something that I've never kind of understood.
Yeah,
But I
yeah,
thought it was really cool that you explored this sort of celebrity idea alongside the experiences that they're having as human beings. They're experiencing
mm,
what all human beings experience at some point in their life, like grief and
mm,
poor mental health and and motherhood and all these other kind of topics. But then they're under this kind of like lens,
yeah,
like microscope. I don't
Yeah,
know what you kind of call it, but that they're having to deal with that, like that extra layer that we don't have a kind of understanding
yeah,
of. So that was really interesting to me.
yeah,
absolutely. And,
100%.
and I felt like you juxtapose the kind of, as you were saying, this kind of high art, high, culture world with like pictures of Ingrid like completely off her face in an alleyway. Like, and just the way that those two kind of lives coexisted, I thought was such an interesting approach really to the culture of celebrity, because we saw it with, especially in, I'd say, the early 2000s with people like Amy Winehouse,
Yeah,
who were
yeah,
creating this beautiful and fantastic art, but also self-destructing, and it was all laid bare on the front page of papers,
yeah,
and
exactly.
we're
Yeah.
following along with it.
Yeah.
um
And I was really thinking about like those kinds of people like Amy Winehouse
mm,
when I was writing as well. People like Kate Moss and Naomi Campbell and these women who were like incredibly beautiful at the top of their game, but also like every single failure they ever had was like on the front of a tabloid as well. So I think Amy Winehouse is a really good comparison actually. And I think the other thing is there's a lot of tension for Ingrid, especially about like making art for money as well. And I think that was something, that I was really thinking about when I was writing, and kind of having a bit of crisis in my own like self about, what am I doing this for? Am I doing this for money, or am I doing it because I love it? Or am I trying to say something? And I think that's like a really big part of Ingrid's story as well, in terms of, she has all of these accolades and she's, really celebrated, but she also has a huge problem with making it like a commercial venture, if you like. And I think that's a big part of her story as well. And it does, and I think it feeds into, the sort of the late 90s, early noughties culture that you were talking about, Lydia, in terms of, people like, it's not just that you can create something and the art exists in its own right. There's also like a cult of personality that goes with that as well. And I think that's a lot of what Ingrid experiences and struggles with in the book.
Absolutely. And I mean, if it's not been clear enough, we clearly very much enjoy Girls, and we cannot recommend it enough. Before we do let you go, though, I do have to ask you my favourite question, which is what are your literary influences?
Oh God, what a good question. I mean, I've already said so. Little Miss Sunshine was a big influence on this book. I think also I really, in terms of like what we've just been talking about in terms of like celebrity culture and stuff, I think I was really deep into my Taylor Jenkins Reid bit when I was writing as well. Like I was really interested in like the idea of like an alternative universe of celebrity. So that definitely came into the book. Yeah, I think, other road trip narratives, which now I can't think of a single one off the top of my
It's
head.
always the way.
I think
Always.
like, like Lady Bird and Florida Project and stuff like that, although that's not road trips. But, I think I wanted to tell a story in that vein that was kind of like bleak but also light at the same time. But I think in terms of books, oh, good question. I mean, I always say Miriam Taves is like my biggest inspiration. She's like, I rate her so highly. She's my favorite author. And the stories that she tells and like the emotional like heart of the stories is something that I'm always like reaching for in my own writing. So,
Where
yeah.
would you suggest starting with her? Because I haven't read any of her books.
Oh, I would suggest starting with a book called A Complicated Kindness.
Oh,
And then actually, so the first book of hers that I read many years ago is called All My Puny Sorrows, and it is actually, so it follows a woman whose sister is also going through like suicidal ideation. So similar to some of the themes of Girls. But I'd recommend both of those. But everything she writes is like chef's kiss. It's so good.
I've seen the film. Oh, I can't remember what it's called.
Women Talking.
Oh my God, yes. The
Yeah.
film is absolutely like astounding.
Yeah.
Like I
Hard
don't
watch. Hard
hard watch, but like incredible how they like tackled that subject.
Mm,
It's like beautifully done.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I had such a visceral reaction to that film, so I don't know why I've not kind of delved into her books, but I'm definitely
Yeah.
gonna get All My Puny Sorrows after you've said that.
Yeah,
Um,
I'd recommend. She's
Amazing.
brilliant.
And to round off the episode, because we've chewed your ear off enough, I do like to ask for a recommendation, even though you've already given us plenty. But is there anything that you've got in mind?
Oh, I mean, yeah, this is the thing. How can I just give you the one? I mean, I've been thinking about Green Dots since I finished it. I know we talked about it already, but I'd
So
highly
good.
recommend Green Dots. So good.
Love Green
Also, I think the book that I have been thinking about the most this year since I read it is Penance by Eliza Clark.
I've not read
If
it
you
yet.
haven't read it, oh my God. Do you know, I read it and I
You got it,
don't
Lid?
It's right. It's literally
ah
right there.
Oh,
It's just
read
stop.
waiting
honestly,
for
read
me.
it. Read it. Is that the hardback or the paperback?
It's the hardback with the cool little like scrubbed
Oh
out.
yeah, the scribble, yeah. So
Lit-
I took my hardback on the train, which I never do, and that is a testament to how much I loved this book. It's so good. I literally could not put it down.
Okay, well, it's now like on the top of the pile.
Excellent.
You've moved it up. Thank you so much, Kirsty, for joining us today. I can't believe how quickly the time has gone. I'm very upset, but we have been waiting a long time for this, so
It was worth the wait.
it was worth the wait very much. So, where can our listeners find you on social media?
So I'm on Twitter sort of sporadically at Kirsty Capes, and then I'm mostly on Instagram at Kirsty Capes full stop author.
Wonderful. And for listeners, you can find those links in the show notes, along with a link to buy your own copy of Girls, which is out tomorrow, which is incredibly exciting. Go get your copy and then come and speak to all of us, because there were lots of things we wish we could discuss, but we could not, because that would spoil it and you'd shout at us. If you enjoyed this episode, please do rate, review and subscribe so we can reach more of you. And if you want to give us a follow, you can do so at A Pair of Bookends Pod on Instagram and at A Pair of Bookends on Twitter and TikTok. And go follow our Patreon as well for more exclusive content. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much once again, Kirsty. You've been an absolute delight.
Thank you. Oh, that's so nice. Oh, is that going to be on the end of the recording now?
Yes. No. Goodbye.